They say the cruelest betrayal isn't when someone lies to you. It's when they use your love to fund their lies. My name is Ethan Cole. For 12 years, I thought I was living the dream. A stable marriage, a cozy home, and a wife who said all the right words. But behind every I love you, Jessica was building a secret life. And she was paying for it with my money. It started with small things, missing amounts, unexplained charges, excuses that sounded almost believable. I thought it was stress, maybe my memory, maybe inflation, but one night I checked the wrong account and uncovered a truth so cruel it took everything in me not to destroy them both. I didn't shout. I didn't break. I smiled, and I made a plan, one that would make sure the whole town saw what kind of woman she really was. This isn't just a story about betrayal. It's about control. It's about letting karma do the talking. Welcome to Revenge UX, where every lie meets its reckoning. For most of my marriage, I believed Jessica and I were solid. We met young, built everything from scratch, and made promises that felt unbreakable. She was warm, confident, and ambitious, the kind of woman who could light up any room, and I was proud to call her mine. We weren't rich, but we were comfortable. I worked long hours managing logistics at a small company, and Jessica handled the finances at home. She always said she wanted to take that burden off my shoulders, and I trusted her completely. At first, I thought the distance between us was just routine. 12 years can dull the spark in any marriage. Late nights, quiet dinners, unspoken silences, they crept in slowly, like a fog you don't notice until you can't see anything clearly anymore. Then came the small changes. She started dressing up more, even when she said she was just running errands. Her phone never left her hand, and when I'd walk into a room, she'd lock it or flip it face down. I told myself I was imagining things. One night, I noticed a new perfume on her, one I hadn't bought. When I asked, she said it was a gift from her friend at work. Something about the way she said it made my stomach twist. Over the next few weeks, money started disappearing in small amounts. 50 here, 100 there. Jessica said she was helping her sister with bills. I wanted to believe her, so I did. But trust has a way of whispering when something isn't right. And soon those whispers grew louder. I remember sitting at the kitchen table one night, staring at our bank statement. 2 unfamiliar charges caught my eye, both at a luxury restaurant I'd never been to. Same date, 2 payments. When I asked Jessica, she laughed it off, said it was a client dinner she paid for and got reimbursed in cash. It sounded reasonable. But deep down, I knew something was off. That was the night I decided to stop asking questions and start watching instead. Once I stopped asking questions, things became clearer. It's strange how the truth starts showing itself when you stop chasing it. I began keeping quiet, pretending everything was fine. Smiling at breakfast, kissing her goodnight, playing the role of the loving husband she thought I still was. But behind that smile, I was collecting details. Dates, receipts, card statements. Every dollar that left our account told a story. I just had to listen closely. One afternoon, while she was at work, I logged into our joint account. There it was again, a withdrawal from an ATM across town. A place Jessica had no reason to be near. A small hotel, a restaurant next door, and then the same names repeating across multiple transactions. Ryan's Bistro, Blake's Garage, RB Consulting. The initials hit me like a brick. RB Ryan Blake, a man I used to call a friend. Ryan and I went to college together. We lost touch after he started his own small business, but I'd helped him once, lent him money when his company was struggling. I never asked for it back. Maybe I should have. The next few days, I pretended everything was normal. Jessica started smiling more, dressing better, humming around the house again. It was almost insulting how happy she looked. Then I checked our savings account. Several $1,000s were gone, transferred to an unlisted account under Jessica's name. I didn't confront her. I just took a deep breath and started documenting everything. Screenshots, statements, photos of her receipts and messages she left open on her laptop. It wasn't just dinners or small gifts. Jessica was paying Ryan's rent, his car loan, even helping him furnish a new apartment. My money, our savings. Every payment she made was a small betrayal, and every discovery I made was another piece of the trap I was quietly building. Because at that point I realized something simple. I didn't just want to expose them. I wanted them to expose themselves. I didn't want a scene. I didn't want screaming or threats. I wanted proof, clean, undeniable proof. Something the town could understand without feeling like I'd dragged my marriage through the mud for the show of it. So I began to build a record. First, I secured copies of every transaction. I downloaded statements and printed them. I photographed receipts. I opened a private folder on my laptop and labeled everything by date. Small things, big things, patterns. I learned to read the codes banks hide in plain sight. Transfers, ACHs, merchant names disguised by payment processors. Money hides behind words, but it still leaves footprints. Next, I needed context. Money can be explained away if you don't attach faces to it. I started tracing the payments back to places. Utilities for Ryan's apartment, furniture stores, with delivery addresses, a storage unit rented under an initial. I cross-referenced delivery addresses with public records. I learned the routes Ryan took, the restaurants he favored, the mechanic shop where he left his truck for a day, then came back with a new set of speakers. I didn't waste energy on confrontation. Confrontation gives people time to prepare a story. Instead, I made sure there would be no story worth telling. There were small risks. Once, Jessica changed passwords and locked her laptop. Once, she started keeping her phone with her at all times. I adapted. I used what people forget: convenience. She left her car unlocked one afternoon. I slid a note under the sun visor with a photograph of a bank transfer and a timestamp. No accusation, just a picture. The subtext was enough. I also set up a backup plan. If anyone accused me of making false claims, I wanted independent witnesses. I reached out to a former colleague who owed me a favor and asked him to meet for lunch near Ryan's new place. I watched through the cafe window as Ryan carried a boxed lamp into an upstairs flat. My colleague took a few photos. Small favors add up. Then came the recordings. I'm not proud of that part, but people who cheat do it in public and call it private. Jessica and Ryan met in a restaurant wing where they thought their whispers would be safe. I sat 2 tables away and recorded a fragment of a conversation where Ryan joked about Ethan covering the rent. It was enough, not salacious, not twisted, just clear. He knew, and he was comfortable with it. I gathered messages too. Jessica trusted convenience. She left a cloud backup synchronized with her phone, and once she left a draft email open on the family computer. In it, she described plans for a weekend getaway on Ryan's dime. That phrase alone made the ledger of betrayal feel simple and human. But evidence by itself doesn't humiliate. Evidence informs. To make the town see, I needed a plan that used normal channels. The bank, the accountant, the neighborhood, so the discovery wouldn't feel like revenge theater. It had to look like truth being found, not a trap being sprung. I started with a neutral party, our family accountant. He'd known us for years. He respected numbers. I scheduled a meeting about taxes, placed the documents on his desk, and asked a single question. Have you ever seen transfers like these? I watched his face as he flipped through the statements. A professional doesn't exaggerate. When he said, "This is deliberate," I felt something cold and steady settle inside me. I asked him to keep the meeting confidential. He did, but he also told me how an accountant reads motive in ledgers. He showed me how payments to rent and utilities disguised as consulting could be presented. With his help, I drafted a packet of evidence that was factual and unemotional. Dates, amounts, recipient names, and matched receipts. Nothing sensational, no commentary, just numbers with supporting documents. Next, I thought about exposure that would sting, but stay legal. I hired a local private investigator, a quiet man who knew how to pull public records and do it without scandalizing the street. The investigator linked Ryan to leases, to a business license for a side job, and to an employee who confirmed he'd received payments not from his business but from a personal account tied indirectly to Jessica. The investigator's report read like paperwork, sterile and undeniable. Then came the moral risk. Witnesses. I couldn't just hand a packet to the press. The town would call it vendetta. So I chose the family circle. I invited Jessica's sister over for coffee under the guise of reconciliation. I left the packet out on the kitchen table. When she saw the header of the bank statement, her face changed in a way words never could. She asked questions. I answered simply and calmly. She took photos on her phone and promised to think about it. At the same time, I started a quiet procedural route. I visited the bank branch and spoke with a manager, explained fraud concerns, and requested a review of large transfers, not to open a scandal, but to create a formal paper trail. Banks are slow but deliberate. They ask questions and file reports that can't be easily dismissed. There's power in bureaucracy. A flagged account forces explanations. An internal review forces the person who manages the money to produce receipts or admit a reason. It's not dramatic. It's surgical. While those small machinery gears turned, I prepared for the moment of public exposure. I chose a familiar setting, the town's community meeting, the place people trusted for neighborhood news. It happens monthly, attended by local business owners, the PTA, and people who gossip in the best possible way, without malice, just curiosity. A reveal there would not be tabloid spectacle. It would be a community conversation. But I didn't want to chair that meeting, and I didn't want it to look like a husband attacking his wife. I wanted it to look like civic concern. So I created a pretext that no one could ignore. A talk about financial literacy for families, framed as a service to the community. I contacted the community center and offered to sponsor the session anonymously through a small donation. They accepted. Under that cover, I invited an independent financial counselor I'd met through the accountant, someone neutral and authoritative. I arranged for copies of the counselor's talk to be distributed beforehand, including generalized examples of the very tactic I'd discovered, transfers disguised as business payments to cover personal expenses. I kept the examples universal, impersonal. On the night of the meeting, the room filled. I sat near the back. Jessica arrived with the composure of someone who believed she could control her image. She smiled at neighbors, nodded to friends, and glanced at me only briefly, as if to say, "This is nothing." The counselor began with hypotheticals. They were ordinary and boring, the kind of lecture people half listen to while texting. Then, near the end, the counselor opened the Q&A and invited anonymous questions submitted earlier. Several attendees handed in cards. One card contained a photocopy of a bank statement. Not ours, but suspiciously similar language. The counselor, trained to be careful, said he couldn't comment on individual cases, but he recommended anyone concerned to consult the bank and bring documentation. At that moment, Jessica's sister stood up. She read what she'd seen, calmly and measured. She didn't accuse. She asked for clarification. People murmured. The room leaned in. Jessica's face, which had been composed, flickered. She could have handled it any number of ways: denial, deflection, confession. Instead, an instinct took over. She laughed it off, called it gossip, and asked the counselor to focus on forward-looking help. The room split between sympathy and suspicion. That was the first crack in public. It wasn't a collapse. It was the sound of a foundation giving under pressure. After the meeting, small things accelerated. A neighbor who ran a small classifieds page posted a question about odd online transfers. A friend who worked at the local paper asked casually if all the coal money stuff was true. I let them ask. I let the question spread. I didn't push. I let the truth, arranged and precise, do its quiet work. Revenge, I learned, is often less about triumph than timing. You don't need to shout if you can time the silence to make others speak. I continued to feed the pattern. I placed anonymously a simple envelope at the desk of the town reporter, the same packet printed cleanly with notes from the accountant and the investigator. No scandal sheet language, no emotional pleas, just facts. The reporter called. She wanted to verify. She wanted quotes. I declined to comment. I let her call Jessica, let her sit through that polished voice that had once soothed our home. I watched from a distance as the reporter's questions pinned small inconsistencies to the wall. When the article ran, it was short and factual. It didn't scream. It simply asked, "How are transfers to a local business being recorded as consulting fees?" The headline read like a question a neighbor would ask at a bus stop, not a vendetta. That's what I wanted. A question is harder to dismiss than an accusation. A question invites answers that, under pressure, reveal themselves. As the town began to whisper, as the bank opened its review, and as the paper asked for accounting records, I felt the shape of the plan forming into something irreversible. Jessica still smiled at me at dinner. She still sat across the room and pretended the world was ordinary. But now the ordinary had a new weight. I'd built a slow, steady machine from documents, discretion, and procedures. It wasn't flashy, but it was precise. It left choices for those involved. It forced them to either tell the truth, produce a story, or watch their lives rearrange under an inevitable scrutiny. That's when Ryan started to get careless. Confident men get careless when they believe the show is over. He started to text from his business number, to leave sly comments on social posts, to use the same payment processors that now had flags attached. Each blunder was another stitch I could pull. I stayed calm. I moved quietly. I didn't say a word to Jessica about the article or the bank's review. I let every institution do its job. Let the bank ask for receipts. Let the reporter ask for comment. Let the community decide. Because the most effective exposure isn't the one you stage in anger. It's the one you organize with patience, until the systems of trust you both relied on turn against you. The morning it all broke, I was halfway through my coffee. The phone buzzed 3 times. The kind of vibration that means something official, not social. When I looked down, the bank's fraud department had emailed me. Please confirm recent transfers. The same transfers I'd already flagged. The machine was moving. I didn't reply right away. I wanted to see how long it would take before Jessica said something. She came downstairs dressed as if nothing had changed, scrolling her phone, humming. The sound of a person still living in her version of reality. At 10:13, she froze. Her phone lit up with notifications, texts, emails, a call from her sister, then one from the accountant. She stepped into the hallway, voice sharp but low. "That's absurd. Why would they think I—" She stopped mid-sentence, realizing she didn't have anyone on her side of the call who believed her story anymore. The first public crack appeared on social media. The local paper's post was simple. Bank reviewing irregular financial activity involving small business accounts linked to 2 local residents. No names. But small towns don't need names. People read between the lines. By noon, the accountant called me. "They're opening a formal audit," he said. "Do you want to be involved?" I told him the truth. I just want it handled cleanly. That night she tried to talk. She stood in the doorway of our living room like a stranger who'd come to reclaim a version of her life. "You did this," she said. "You planted it. You wanted to humiliate me?" I didn't argue. I just looked at her and said, "You humiliated yourself." I just stopped covering it. She called it revenge. Maybe it was. But I didn't raise my voice. I didn't tell her what I'd done or how long I'd known. The truth didn't need commentary. It had its own rhythm now, playing in banks' offices and inboxes. Over the next few days, things unraveled quickly. Ryan's business partner withdrew from their deal. His company account was frozen pending investigation. The truck with his company's logo disappeared from the lot. Jessica's name appeared in a line on a financial report leaked online. One of many individuals under review. Then came the hospital call. Not for her, but for Ryan. A stress collapse, they said. Elevated blood pressure, heart palpitations. Too many questions, too few answers. The kind of collapse that doesn't just happen. It's earned by arrogance and panic. I didn't go see him. I didn't need to. Some pain belongs entirely to its owner. A week later, Jessica moved out. No confrontation, no shouting, just boxes, silence, and the sound of her car leaving the driveway for the last time. I watched from the window as she paused at the stop sign, probably wondering how the person she thought was quiet had turned into someone capable of all this. The town moved on. It always does. But the whispers didn't fade as quickly. Ryan sold his business equipment online for half price. Jessica left her job quietly after a department restructuring. And the family dinners that used to include us? Invitations stopped coming. I didn't celebrate. I didn't post anything. I just cleaned the house, fixed the leaky faucet, and went back to my routines. Revenge isn't fireworks. It's peace after noise. Months later, I met someone new. We talked over coffee about simple things. Work, books, the weather. She didn't ask about the past, and I didn't volunteer it. I'd learned something important. Sometimes justice isn't about punishment. It's about reclaiming silence. Because in the end, revenge isn't loud. It's the quiet sound of truth doing its job.